Ever wonder why your tracks don't sound as loud as your peers or your favourite labels? You're comparing it to another track in the mix and yours just doesn't have it. Or your mix loses punch the moment you push it too loud with a limiter. You're not alone. Most producers drive the limiters, clippers and saturation way too hard, distorting and flatlining the track, killing all the dynamics, and end up with an overcooked, distorted release that's just not worth playing. So in this quick video, I'm going to show you a few simple ways to reduce crest factor of individual sounds and groups without changing or distorting the sound. And if you want to learn more, there's a full in-depth course coming this week on the Subtone website and YouTube subscription. We're going to look into all the techniques that you need, including arrangement, parallel compression, soft and hard clipping, saturation, sidechaining, limiting and more. All working together to control the voltage and crest factor before you ever hit the final limiter, or giving your mastering engineer some headroom to work with. So what's crest factor, I hear you ask? It's simply put the gap between the peaks, the loudest hits, and the average level of your mix, or your individual sounds and groups. The smaller the gap, the more controlled and consistently loud your tracks sound. We can reduce it by slicing peaks with clipping, or limiting, or lifting quieter parts using upward compression, parallel compression and saturation. I'm going to show you how you can reduce the crest factor value by several dB without changing the tone of the track at all. So let's jump in. Okay, so I've got a track that I'm working on here with one of my clients. Let's give it a quick listen. Okay, it's a garagey, deep, techie type track, and it's got lots of transients and it's got a lot of like unruly bottom end. And we'll have a look at the master bus. Okay, so let's have a look at the Swiss Army meter, which is a Max for Live device. And we're going to look for the LUFS, okay, and we're going to look at the true peak. Let's have a look at those. Okay, so the true peak is minus 3.6 and the LUFS is minus 17.8. Now I've not gone to mastering with this, so we're not trying to hit 7 LUFS yet. All I'm trying to do is control this so that the level that goes into the limiter, you know, we can get an extra bit of loudness out of it. So what does that mean? So I've done a few processes which I'm going to show you now, okay? And basically, as soon as our peaks start hitting the master limiter, the sooner we're going to start distorting and breaking our track up. Now, if I can have 2 dB of headroom before that starts to happen, then my track's going to sound louder. So on the key command, I've got everything that I've put on so that I can turn it off. So I've just pressed key up here, add orange, and then turned it on off for everything. Let's have a look at the peak. Just make sure that it's turning it on and off. Okay, there you can see it in the saturator on and off, and the LFO tool. So let's have a look at it off. Okay, so minus 3.6, minus 17.9. Okay, now let's put all those things back on. Okay, so we were at minus 3.6 and now we're at minus 5.8. So that means we've taken off 1.8 dB from the track. Can you hear a difference? There is a slight difference, okay, and we're going to go into that in a second, because we've removed some bass from the track by sidechaining it. But let's have a see what that's doing to the track when we add 1.8 back into it. So 1.8 dB. Okay. So now I'm going to turn this off and then I'm going to turn it on and off for you to listen to what that difference sounds like. Well, that's quite a lot, isn't it? And I've not gone to town on this track. I've just put on a few instances to give you examples of things that can reduce the crest factor. And if you're listening to two tracks and one is the one before and one is the one now, okay, which one are you going to think sounds better? Remember, anything that's louder always sounds better. But really, I'd probably be able to get another dB out of this track. So let's say 2.8. Okay, if I really, really wanted to push this track. So let's have a listen to that on and off. Okay, so why do we need to make our tracks loud? You know, if we've got a gain, the argument is, well, just turn up the gain. Well, the problem you've got is this. In nightclubs, a lot of the clubs and bars and places that us DJs play have got limiters on there. Okay, so if we've got two tracks that are both hitting the same peak value, okay, as soon as the one with the higher peaks hits, it's going to start limiting, okay? And this is what this difference is. You know, the difference we can get in volume before that limiter starts working in a club is anything between 1 and 4 or 5 dB in difference just by mixing for loudness, okay? So, which do you want? You know, do you want a limiter in a club to start hitting quicker or later? This is the main reason why we mix for loudness. And of course, you know, we're trying to preserve transients, we're trying to preserve dynamics, and we're trying to make it punch as hard as possible. All these things that can be killed when you don't use the tools right that I'm going to use. And that's why I've designed the full course to go in depth, to show you how to use saturation and clipping and limiting, to learn what these things can do in a good way, but also in a bad way, and tune your ears so that you can use clippers in the correct way and know when to use them, but also when not to use them. So if you've got two tracks playing in a club, they both have the peak, same peak value, okay, but the second one has a reduced crest factor, that's the one's going to sound bigger in the club, okay, because you'll have the extra headroom. And again, listen to this example of 2.8 dB extra headroom created by the techniques for mixing for loudness. So this is it before, and then I'm going to turn it on, and that's the extra headroom, and that's how much louder your tracks are going to sound. And as we know, louder sounds better to most people. So if your track is the one that doesn't have the loudness, it's not going to have the punch, you know, and feel bigger in a club. And also when DJs are listening to them and they're A/Bing them, if yours sounds louder, you know, they're going to think yours is better. Okay, so what tools have we used here? Okay, well, first of all, what I do is I look at my track and I put an oscillator on all my groups. You can put them on the individual items and I look at them. Okay, so each of these groups or buses, you can see they're coloured as per the group. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so just by looking at this, I can see that the kick, the clap, and the bass all hit together at one time. And here with the music, and I can see that those things are possibly going to be the loudest part, and they're the parts that I need to concentrate on. Okay, so if we look at this, the sum of all these together, we can see quite clearly that here and here, which is where the kick is, they're all a bit loud, okay? But there is something in between here with the hat and part of the percussion, which looks like it's also needs to be tamed down a little bit. What's the first thing you should look at really is your arrangement. When we say arrangement, we don't mean from 0 to 219 bars. What we mean is from 20 hertz to 20k, all playing at the same time. So the kick, because the bottom end has more voltage and more energy, that's what's going to hit your limiter first. So you can reduce the stuff by addressing the bottom end first, and what's all hitting at the same time as the kick, that's really going to help you. So you might want to do something before you go to the kick, like getting your loop and putting a sidechain on. Obviously using your ears, taking out what's on the kick. And that will help it so that the build-up of voltage on the kick is reduced, meaning you can get your tracks louder. And in dubstep, you know, things don't hit at the same time. They have questions and answers, and you'll have a kick which is very short, and the bass is generally won't be on the kick a lot of the time. And the kick will be higher up and the sub will be lower down. And it's about carving out the space for each item. Something's got to win, okay? So it's the kick or the bass. So are you getting rid of the bass in the kick or the bass in the bass when the kick hits? Because the kick has got the bass in it. Obviously, in house music 4/4, we're going to sidechain the bass to the kick. So we've got the kick. What can we do with the kick? So in this instance, I've done some parallel compression, okay? So let's have a look at what that level is first of all. Okay, so minus 11 on my kick and minus 3.74 on the master. Now if I put on the glue compressor, which is in parallel, because there's dry wet, I'm adding some parallel compression. So I've used a fast attack and a medium slow release. And we're going to have a look at what it does. Now, when you add these processes, whether it's EQ or saturation or parallel compression, you have to try and get them level matched to perceived loudness, to what your ear is, not to what's on the meter. Okay. Now, there are a couple of plugins you can use. This is a one by Max for Live called Volume Buddy. And you put it on either side and it tells you the difference between the two. And so we can use that. I'll go into this in the course, but let's have a listen to what that glue compressor is doing. So minus 11 and minus 3.74. Okay, so now we're minus 12.1, okay, and minus 4.08. So we've reduced it quite a bit just by the parallel compression. Let's turn it on and off in the mix to see if you can hear a difference. can't really hear it in the mix, can you? Sounds good. In the course, we're going to go deep into this. We're going to show you how to do it and what to look out for. I've then got some clipping. Okay, so let's put the clipping on and off. Let's have a look at it first of all. Okay, minus 12.1. Okay, minus 4.05. Okay, so we've taken off like another dB on the kick, which is related to almost half a dB on the master, you know. And let's just put this in isolation because I want you to see what have you done here, standard clip. So I've added a bit of some soft clipping here, which introduces a bit of saturation before it actually clips it. And I've brought it down and clipped it at the top. But let's have a listen to it in isolation, what that sounds like. There's not much difference, is there? You know, so like, okay, I like it, but actually, I want to show you something. I can push this because I think this kick is a bit nice for this kind of track. So I can use the clipper to take even more headroom out of the kick, okay, but then make the kick sound better for this track. Hear it distorting? Okay, I like that distortion, the boxiness of it. Okay, I'm going to push it just so you can see what this does. Yeah, we're losing the kick, aren't we? I like it for this kind of track. So this isn't about mixing for loudness. I'm just doing it stylistically, but I'm also getting a bit more headroom out of it. So let's see what that is now. It was 12, it was 13 before. 16. So that's massive, okay? And it's only because it's a style of track, but you've got to be careful that you're not destroying your transients or crushing the sound. And this is what clipping can do, as you heard when I went too far. So let's listen to that in the track, because that's all that matters. Okay, I prefer the stylistically, but I do prefer it up here because the tap was coming through more. So I might come back to that because I've not sidechained the bass yet. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to use the clipper for two reasons. Okay, but if I can push it a bit more, then I will do, because the kick and the clap and the bass together is the main part of the track I'm trying to reduce. And we want to do that individually, first of all. So that's a bit of soft clipping. Now let's go to the bass. Okay, so on the bass here, I've got a saturator. So let's have a look at what the bass is. Minus 16.1, minus 4.47. Now let's put the saturator on. And again, we can't hear any difference. I've listened in isolation, our perceived volume's the same, but we've taken out, you know, some of the sub bass, okay? And we're taking off, you know, 0.3 dB of the master. It's all the little things that add together to get that 1.8 dB that we had before. Okay, so what else can I do? Well, if the kick, the bass and the clap together, the main areas for creating that loudness spike that's going to hit the limiter at that point, then why don't we take out the sub of the bass when the kick is playing? Okay, in my sidechaining course, we go deep into mixing kick and bass, into using an LFO tool. I'm doing this quite drastic sidechaining under 144 hertz. Let's look at the numbers on that. So minus 17.2 and minus 4.62. Let's put on the sidechain. Okay, that's made a massive difference, specifically on this master bus. Okay, why is that? Okay, because we're making space for the kick, so we've not got double voltage at that one point in time. Okay, now what you can notice here is I have taken some of the bass out. So as I'm in my course, I'd probably carve this to make it better, and it would probably reduce it, you know, not as much, but it's all these little bits that are helping us get a louder track without distorting or killing dynamics. And because we're not like recording a full drum kit and we've got individual items and we're doing it on the individual items, you know, we're not touching the dynamics. So we don't touch the dynamics until we get to the groups. So making sure that there's space in the lower frequencies is key to getting loud music. And go deep into the things that you can do to help reduce the output of the voltage by working on your bottom end. Okay, so the next thing was the snare. Let's have a look at the snare. Let's have a look at the volume. Okay, so it's minus 11.5, and what I've done here, I have hard clipped, and I've hard clipped it quite a lot, okay? And in isolation, I don't really like what it's doing, but in the mix, I don't mind it, okay? Because I want the clap really loud, so I'm quite happy, the snare, sorry, I'm quite happy to have that really loud, you know, whilst losing a bit of transient because I've got the kick punching through. So let's have a listen to that in isolation. Okay, now let's turn on the clipper. Okay, can you hear there's a little bit more grit? There's a bit, I can hear a little bit of distortion in there, but you know, this is garage. It's all distorted lo-fi stuff anyway. So I quite like that in the mix, but what have we done to the peak factor? Okay, minus 11.5, okay? Let's put the clipper on. $21, okay? Massively reduced it, okay? But what does it sound like in the mix on and off? Okay, you are losing a little bit. We might back off a tiny little bit. But I'm mindful that I'm doing it. Will people be able to hear that I've done that? No. But will they be able to hear that my track's quite a bit louder at this point? Yes, they will. Okay, so let's just see what that's done to the master. So minus 6.11. Okay, so on the master, it's only made a little bit of difference, okay? But that's okay. You know, every little bit counts. And remember what I did, took away 1.7 dB. And when we added that 1.7 dB back in, you could majorly hear the difference. And this is the key. You've got to keep going into every little thing individually, then the groups, you know, and then if they go into groups, into them groups, and then into the pre-master, and then into the master. So that's a bit of hard clipping, which has reduced it quite a lot on the channel, but not as much on the group. Okay, I could also see a hi-hat that was coming through using the oscilloscope, and I'm going to go into this quite a lot in depth in the course about how to use that. Okay, so I put a hard clipper on this because the hard clipper is really good for slicing off transients. So let's have a look at the peak value before. So minus 10.9 and minus 6.06. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Put this on. Okay, so I've taken off 8 dB there and 0.37 here. Again, it's not a lot, okay, on the master bus. So you might say, oh, 3.37 louder isn't a big difference. Yes, you're right. But remember, when I turned them all off at the same time before, there was 1.7 dB, which is a lot, you know, and you couldn't hear a difference, besides a little bit in the bottom end. And there is something in the top end that goes. Sometimes when you're using clippers like this, especially hard clipping, and I go deep into that in the course and tune your ears in how to hear for it. I've used some saturation, soft clipping on the bass. I've used some hard clipping on the hi-hats and the snare. I've used some soft clipping saturation on the kick. And then I have used a limiter on the top bass. Here's my limiter. Let's look at that. I've obviously used Volume Buddy again. Let's look at that on and off. Minus 17.1, minus 6.35. Now this is the high bass. Let's turn that on. Now, just tiny things here, right? You know, 0.6, you know, is it 0.04? Everything's adding up, okay? But the key is this, you know, what am I doing to my track? What am I doing to my bass? Is it distorted? Is it sounding worse? Is it sounding better? Let's listen to that. So with things like the limiter here, each note has its own volume, you know, and the difference between the volumes is the dynamics. And with the limiter, we need to watch that we're not destroying the bounce of the dynamics of the bass line. Okay, and for me, it sounds good. Again, all that matters is how it sounds in the mix, because this bass line has been played to whatever else is in the mix. Sounds okay to me. I'm quite happy with that. These are just quick things that I've done to show you examples, you know, of arrangement, parallel compression, saturation, soft clipping, hard clipping, limiting, you know, of how we can get an extra 1.7 dB out of the track. And I haven't gone to town on these yet. Okay, let's listen to the track with it on and off. Okay, listen to the bass, listen to the mids, listen to the high. Okay, the tops are pretty much exactly the same. You know, the mid-range is fine. The bottom end has lost a little bit of the bass, okay? But the kick is coming through a little bit more. So we might want to balance that out, okay? But we've got 1.7 dB extra headroom, okay? So what does that sound like? So this is before the volume. And this is how much louder we can make our track sound in the club. Okay, there's a big difference, isn't there? You know, and like I said, I could probably get another dB or 2 dB out of this without destroying the sounds or the dynamics or the punch of the track. We're going to deeper techniques where we add saturation and parallel compression and upward compression for bringing up the low parts of the track so that we can give the track less crest factor, which makes it sound louder, which then means we can turn it up more. So there you go, a few essential tools that let you make your tracks louder without destroying your mix or the individual sounds. If you want to go deeper into how each of these techniques work, the orders you use them, and the exact settings, and how to avoid the artifacts, I break it all down step by step inside the How to Make Your Music Loud Without Killing the Mix course. You'll learn when not to and when to mix for loudness, how to use clippers, parallel compression, saturation, and how to master limiting for loudness without losing punch and dynamics. Head to subtonemusicacademy.com or join the Subtone YouTube subscription if you prefer 4K for just £10 a month to get access to over 50 hours of in-depth video training. And you can cancel anytime. I'm Jason Hurd, thanks for watching.